Y'all, we live in difficult times. There's war, political unrest, the pandemic, poverty, families being torn, communities ripped by gun violence, and people dying every day. Police, injustice, it's all bringing so much pain. But y'all, we can look inside our minds and we can understand who we are, become better, and do this thing like we've never done it before. But it all starts with our mental health, and I know we can do it. I believe in you because I believe in me, and I believe in us.
All these little effects actually have a very strong cascading effect right around the world. And it's just a matter, like you said. So, one, how do you experience it? Two, where do you experience it? Three, what are you doing about it? If you understand there's something for us to do.
Right, right. And you know, from the mental health perspective, like a lot of young people are expressing, you know, anxiety, people who have lost their homes or they due to whether it be tornadoes, hurricanes, or you know, forest fires, you
Sure.
know, that's a form of trauma.
Yep.
And for many people who have, you know, what we call eco anxiety, it's the belief or the concern that, you know, the earth at some point may become inhabitable. You know, it's a very serious existential threat. And so they live with that and they worry about it. And they tend to be more concerned about it than older people, you know, and that's unfortunate because I think about it, you know, our children and then having children
Hmm.
and then their children, you know, what the earth will be like. But the beautiful thing is the science also suggests to us if we change our behavior that the earth could correct itself. Just
Yes.
like it, because if I'm understanding correctly, because we got rid of the gases we use for refrigerators and
Freon.
freon, because we
Refrigerant
stopped
12.
using that,
Typically, refrigerant 12.
that the ozone layer has significantly improved itself.
It has. It has.
Mhm.
I mean, a lot of things. You look at LA,
Side note, yeah, just keep that in mind, y'all. Go
right?
ahead.
For sure. I mean, tons of things. Look at LA. Remember the smog you used to see when you see a visual of the city itself? That's what,
Right. Uh-huh.
right? And people, particularly some manufacturers, want to complain about California. Oh, California has special needs. They want special gasoline. They need special vehicles. They have special gas miles consumption requirements and regulation and da 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 da. It's helped that city. It's helped that environment and the ecology around it, right? So everything things come with a price, but things come at a cost.
Yeah, because I remember when I was a kid seeing pictures of the smog, and then they had the acid rain stuff going on. Right. And that the acid rain wasn't just in LA, was
LA,
it?
yeah, right,
No,
exactly.
it wasn't just in LA.
It travels.
And you know, I hate to say this about Cleveland but I think it's important that we remember these things because, you know, Cleveland's river caught on fire.
Yeah.
Pollution.
I grew up, it was clean enough for us to swim in Lake Erie,
Mhm.
right? Menor Headlands Beach. We used to hit that all the time, right? And people wouldn't think about it, right, today. So some of the cleanup that they started, downtown actually helped. But yeah,
Mhm.
I mean, the river was polluted beyond belief. Industry.
Right, right. But getting to your point about pollution and how California cleaned up stuff, because they cleaned it up because they had to, because it was just a mess.
Yes. But they took ownership of it, right? And they led the charge with, we're going to do things differently and we're going to make it so, right? They got the government behind it, you got regulation behind it, you got standards behind it, you got manufacturers who are required with penalty to
Mhm.
subscribe to these new standards, right? And they scaled that such that the state itself was actually working in unison with respect to that, right? So as much as California is different, California is taking control of its own destiny to the extent that it can.
Right, right, right. You know, sometimes people get short timers disease. You know, they just forget like where we came from or what the experience was or why things are what they are.
Mhm.
And we just think that somebody just, you know, picked to create all these regulations because, oh, they just wanted to. They just wanted to make things more expensive or more difficult. But on many levels, it was to save lives. I mean, just like the whole idea that, you know, pollution travels along the jet stream. So because it travels along the jet stream, it
Yes,
moves across the United States. And by the way, the places where people are more likely to be exposed to pollution and develop what we consider to be diseases like asthma and you
oh, of
know certain
course.
type of allergies and things may have a lot to do with the fact that a lot of the pollution in America sits or moves towards the northeastern coast
It
where
does.
people might be more likely to experience things like asthma.
It does. Collects is concentrated and travels definitely that way. Yeah.
So, like, so if you don't have no regulation for that, like, oh, we can just dump it in the air, like, just dump it, just dump it. It's not gonna hurt nobody. It's not gonna hurt us. It's not gonna hurt us. This is all a part of us being happy and healthy and living the life we want to live. We just breathe that stuff in. Just breathe it in. Oh yes,
Good for
you
you,
know.
right? It's good for you. Well, you know, the current administration is looking to reject and reverse the fundamental claim that carbon dioxide is harmful to the environment. Because
Mm,
all of these environmentally friendly and responsible type initiatives are predicated upon that, right?
mm.
Federal mandate that actually has put that claim in place, and he's looking to repeal that, and as such, eliminate all these other advancements. So if I wouldn't expect anyone's really read the entire big, beautiful, if you want it to be bill, but that bill is very dangerous.
Okay.
I mean,
So with that being said, what are some things you think like as individuals? What do you think is some things? Because you know, as a therapist, I'm always trying to encourage people to control their controllables,
yes,
the things that you have immediate contact with. So let's talk about this on two levels. Number one, what do you think people can do to help reduce their carbon footprint? And then, of course, the second part of the question is, what are the bigger question? What's some of the technology and some of the things we're doing right now? What we can do, and maybe you can talk a little bit more about the initiative that you're working on to
sure.
help address this moving
Well,
forward.
you know, we can always be energy conscious,
Mm-hmm.
right? the Do you leave your car running when you're sitting up waiting to go into the store? Do you leave the lights on in the house when all the lights are on upstairs, nobody's upstairs,
Mm-hmm.
right? You have to appreciate that easily 76, no, actually it's more than that. It's about 80% plus or minus of the energy required to produce electricity when you flip the switch is wasted, right?
Mm,
It only serves to effectively produce carbon dioxide.
mm,
Imagine that, right? It's what if
mm-hmm.
you were to what would you consume if you were to buy a I don't know, say what do we like to get, a slushy
Mm-hmm.
at the movies, right? And you get one of these 30-ounce slushies. Well, if 80% of that wasn't there when you stuck your straw in it, you'd be upset.
Right,
They're already charging arm and leg for it anyway, right?
right,
Really,
right.
and 80% of it's gone. You'd be highly upset, right? But that's what our experience isn't, understanding those losses. Our experience is when I flick the switch, the lights come on.
Right.
And then depending on what you do, what you're not charged based on your consumption, no matter where, depending on where you are, right? That's your experience for, okay, setting expectation that I should be paying $500 a month for my electricity bill, or $250 a month for my electricity bill, right? Whatever it is, that becomes your normal. And you kind of divorce yourself of why, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, your AC settings, right? So I'm Houston, it's burning in the summertime, right? Do you turn the do you turn the temperature up before you leave the house for a couple of hours? Or do you leave it sitting at, say, 70, 72, whatever, so it's cool when you get back?
Mm-hmm.
While nobody is here. Now, money, you have a dog, you could argue, okay, and maybe the dog wants to be cool, right? But nobody's here. So there's certain things you can do. Your fuel consumption, you can use a higher level octane gas. It's more expensive. You can buy vehicles that actually get more miles to the gallon. They may or may not be more expensive, may or may not serve your need, but there are better options out there today than there were 10, 15 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
You can talk about getting electrical vehicles, but I'm one that understands too. You need to have a distribution network in place. You're not going to drive from New York to LA in an EV today, right? You never really know when you're going to need to get charged, let alone it can take you 3 weeks to get there because of how long it takes you to charge a vehicle. But those technology advancements are coming, right? They're just not here yet.
Let me ask you something about EVs. I don't mess with your flow on that. So on one end, the EV, you're not producing carbon directly. However, when you tap into the electrical grid, you are using carbon.
Right.
So
serve to you, how is it generated?
Yeah, right. So
now, you're not going to know as a consumer. You're just going to know that I'm charging the battery, right?
Right.
Maybe they advertise and maybe they don't, but there are different variables that are there that that energy could be produced from what we'll call a gray source, right, rather than green energy. Green served electricity is coming from renewable sources, whether it's coming directly from solar, from wind, right, or from water electrolysis is sparking hydrogen separating from oxygen through water, and you're using electricity to spark that, right? Even that comes at a cost, right? How much energy is required to do so? That's where your green energy comes from, and your blue energy coming from these other realms where maybe it's like natural gas producing the electricity, so the burn off isn't as harmful to the environment. But if it's coal produced, that's gray, right? That's very far from green. And electricity at that stage, electricity is electricity, right? Is it charging my battery or not? But where it came from is a big deal, right? But it's like you don't want to see the sausage making. You just want to enjoy the sausage.
Yeah. But if you saw it, what it's being made out of, I asked that question because if it's coming from coal or some fossil fuel, then even though there might be some benefit to having the EV, it's still lessened a little bit because you pulling away from a fossil fuel energy source.
Yes, and that's why I say that it comes with a cost, and what the cost is, and everyone's not concerned about the cost line. Mostly, cost line isn't exposed to people at the point of purchase, the point of consumption, right? They just know the availability of it at a certain rate, and do they want to pay the price?
Right. All right, so move on. I was just curious, so move on with the other things we might can do that we have control on.
And then from there, I mean, environmental cleanup. It's I would take my kids to the little creek, and we gather the garbage up that's around there. You could say, oh, well, that's not really contributing to global warming. Well, part of it is it's a mindset, right? You want to drive a culture. You want to drive series and sets of expectations for how you actually exist and live in our environment, right? So, my kids will see people who littered and they call it out, right? Wow, they littered, and like that's a bad person, right? Doing a bad thing, right? And that mindset actually makes a difference, right? It's something that can be very what's the word I want to use, catchy, right? And infectious in a very positive manner, where you get other people to subscribe to the same mentality, and next thing you know, your rivers are clean, your lakes are clean, your streets are clean, right? It's like the first time I went to Milwaukee, right, living in Chicago, and Chicago's not really that dirty, but Milwaukee is the cleanest city I've ever seen. I mean, it's spotless everywhere, and it's so clean, you notice it, right? Imagine if you had that everywhere.
Right, mentality.
It's a choice, right, that we're making, right? And why not make a collective choice to do those things?
Right. I think about some other things like carpooling, using public transportation. Try to be very particular in your you're driving, so you get things done, you do more efficiently, so you're not doing a lot of running in and out to take
True.
care of stuff. Try,
True.
better planning, organizing,
True.
those things. And of course, that thing what you said about lights, man, I think that was just so deeply important because the amount of energy it takes to turn the light on and off, that's
Yeah.
that's critical because we don't have a sense of that. We just turn lights on and off. We don't. We just leave them burning, not realizing that hey, there's some coal might be burning somewhere with
Sure.
that, with
You know,
every
something like
light that's on. So
the night
really trying
lights
to
you have,
get
if they're
perspective on those kind of things.
yeah, like the night lights you have, if you have them on motion sensors rather than just the flipped on, then maybe the motion sensing might get to you, but you're not burning through electricity all night long, right? For no reason.
Exactly, and so those little habits and just important, or like running just wasting hot water, wasting water, just like it's gonna just be there. Like
Yeah.
I think when I talk about us being use consumers of the earth, I think we believe that it's infinite. We fail to understand that the earth is like us, finite. It is limited.
Very much.
And sometimes I wonder all this push is about the fact that maybe we have passed the apex point with a lot of the resources that we're using.
They're struggling to replenish themselves through natural recourse, right? I mean,
Right.
we're about to have water scarcity. That's literally right around the corner.
Right. So what do you think? So some of the things we can do, like on technology, that's helping us with this
So
problem.
technology wise, we're getting smarter about the fact that we can do things, how we do things. We're still figuring that out to make them scalable. So for example, one of the realms that we work in and function in reducing the carbon footprint is looking to repurpose carbon dioxide waste into biofuels. There's a number of different sources of waste, carbon dioxide being one of them, right? You have the offshoot of, if you're doing ethanol production, corn stalk and all that, that's bio waste, biomass, right?
Mhm.
Waste to fuel, waste to profit is a very lucrative and attractive argument,
Mhm.
right? And there are realms that have proven the ability to achieve this, but not necessarily scalable. Now, these special cases, right? The moons are in line and I can do it and it's done and there it is. Okay.
Mhm.
But when you start reducing that to practice and you need to be able to scale that, now you need the material choice makes a difference. Your overall control around your process is very critical. And then to what extent is this effective, one, let alone efficient? And you start talking about efficiencies like we used to have, back in like the 70s with the gas consumption, the vehicles getting like 8 miles to the gallon. You can't sell a car today that gets 8 miles to the gallon. People never considered, they didn't make purchasing decisions based on your your fuel consumption back then,
Right.
right? And it's very much within, your top shelf, if you will, of your decision makers around what vehicle you're going to get, as long as you're within, you're not talking about something over probably 100,000, over 100,000, you don't really care. You want the vehicle that you want. But the dominant mass market number of vehicles, people concerned, how far can I get on a gallon of gas, right?
Right.
So when you advance that forward, this electricity, at some point there's going to be a concern about, well, how clean is this electricity source? You start looking at other realms. They're looking at how to leverage hydrogen. You want to stay away from the Hindenburg type of scenarios. But hydrogen itself has benefits in a lot of different ways. How is energy stored? So one is just start thinking about it, right? When you
Mhm.
start thinking about it, you start talking about it, you start seeing opportunities, you start sharing those. Next thing you know, you by definition start innovating in those realms, right? And then it's just a matter of where certain things start to click, right, and catch fire. And I think that's that's the key thing there is innovation. But I think it's not as simple as just saying innovation. What does that mean, right? It needs to be relevant. It needs to be in the space. It needs to be leveraging things that exist and innovating through how you either can incrementally improve, let alone disruptively improve. And even like with EVs, okay, the electrical vehicles, that's not innovation. Electrical motors well before And at the same time, we have these gas consuming, right, motors. We
Mm.
just went down a different path, and there's stories behind that as to why. But there are benefits to it right now that bring it back into consideration. So the innovation has to bring benefits. We have to understand what the costs are around it. And then once you get to that realm, you can't get away from the fact that some money is going to have to be made. Otherwise, how is it sustainable? Right? Sustainable, scalable solutions, very critical, very important. And you see these incentives coming from government. And that happens around the world. But the incentives presently go back to that big would be called beautiful bill is eliminating those incentives
Mm.
for clean energy, right?
Right.
Because depending on how you want to look at things, your traditional petrochemical companies are impacted by the success of that market. And some people want them to not be impacted, right? So I saw this and I didn't see it myself, but I heard the claim of the inside scoop on this closed door conversation that the guy who's occupying the presidency presently had with
Right.
representatives. I use that word intentionally. Have the representatives of the chemical industry. And he told them, like, listen, pay me $1 billion and I'll protect you. Right? So, and then you look at this big, beautiful bill, right? And all of these realms that had, so hydrogen production, hydrogen's a really big deal. There's a lot of investment going to hydrogen. You look at some of these blue states actually seem to be investing more than red states are. But there's this timeline for these solutions to get online, and there's funding tied to it. Like there's this entity that's tied to Midwest. It's Illinois, and I think Indiana has the potential to extend into Ohio and Michigan, and I think also possibly Minnesota. But Mach H2, they won $500 million. Was that right? Yeah, and the 500 million is in question because it's not given in a lump sum up front; it's over time. So
Right.
the big beautiful bill required for these hydrogen production generating entities to be online by the end of the year 2027, which I think it advanced it forward somewhere between like 5 and 10 years. Otherwise, they won't get the funding. How do you
Mm.
advance production by 5 to 10 years?
Mm.
So, allegedly 75% of them will lose their funding. They won't be able to make it. They don't have the money for it.
Mm.
They can't advance that fast and accelerate it that fast, and they can't get online, which means they won't have those dollars. You have these other there's different realms of hydrogen production, but in the transportation sector of it, you've seen a lot of these companies go underwater. They announced it back in the deep side of the fourth quarter. It happened deep into the fourth quarter. There was an election. And then after the inauguration, they went boom, belly up, and they filed for bankruptcy. And you see these companies, they had to have gotten $1 billion. You see these hordes of semis, right? The hydrogen based semis that were building all this equipment. They never even took out of the crates,
Right.
boom, to belly up, right? So that side of the market, from a demand perspective, is very, very challenged. From an actual energy consumption scenario, it's a little bit different, right? But you still, they're looking at how do they optimize their processes and how do they get greener hydrogen produced, and that hydrogen can be served into electricity. And the greener it is, the cleaner it is, the better it is. And at this stage, the costlier. So here's your incentive from the government coming in trying, what is it? There's a 111 initiative from the Department of Energy to achieve $1 per 1 kilogram of hydrogen within 1 decade, right? That's the 111. And the decade expires in 2030, right?
Mm. Okay.
To represent an 80% reduction in the cost of hydrogen to be achieved by that time frame. Well,
Right.
okay, there's a goal, and you call it a stretch goal, and there's an expectation that technology and innovation are going to get us there. They don't know how. Now, mind you, I get that, right? I grew up in an environment where we were committed to produce, develop, and deliver at scale at a high level of confidence and efficiency, things that we didn't know how to do, and it didn't,
Right.
right? So I get that. But how do we get there? And there's incentive to help get us there, but these incentives being ripped out, you had 5 to, depending on the source of hydrogen, 3 to I think $7 per kilogram being contributed by the government as an incentive to help reduce that effective cost of hydrogen. Guess what won't exist anymore? That incentive.
The
So now
incentive.
what are these producers going to do? Because now what are you can't sell at $12 per kilogram and be effective and make money, right? And the government's contribution of $5 to $8 per kilogram, that's going away if it's not already gone. So now,
Gotcha.
right? So there's, and then you can never overlook other things that are being helpful in other dimensions. So AI, machine learning, it's very relevant. You want to have some AI agents doing something, but you need to be able to direct them, right? Having AI doesn't mean anything, right? AI
Right.
is relevant in space with the understanding of what it is that needs to be done and directing those agents to do those things, that only have the necessary checks and balances, assessing its own production. That's very different. But you
Right. Exactly.
got to get your
So
mind around that.
gotcha. Gotcha. But we're hoping that AI will, maybe you have the right agents, will continue to do calculations and formulas and theorize and come up with some answers for for clean energy that we don't already have, we don't see right now, perhaps.
Yeah. There's tons of data out there, and it's probably the blessing and the curse, right? Because
Yeah.
there's so much data, there's so much you can model, and so much, but there's so much that can distract you.
Exactly.
What are the
And
relevant data
and
points?
and then too, anytime you come up with something new, it also takes resources from the earth to create those things. So even
It
because
does.
even we talk about windmills, talk about electric cars, anytime you look in it, say, well, what material, what resources, or what natural minerals are needed to create that
You
that
are you
stuff,
talking about
and where do you got to go get it at? So it's like,
platinum-based solution, a tin-based solution? These minerals are still in demand, and the rarer the earth minerals are, you more you see conflict effectively around that. And I say conflict in a different way, not just the conflict that's happening within Africa and definitely centered around Congo, but conflict with how things are structured. You have the Chinese got really smart ahead of the game and decided they were going to go ahead and buy all of the effective reserves for these rare earth minerals. And how do they do that? Doing these deals with some of these African nations, going in and building ports and building, huge infrastructure projects for them, and to get, not just get them, but get them at a discounted price. And the challenge is the processing of all that is actually happening in China, not in Africa. So these African nations aren't benefiting from that. The people coming in, building, doing the work, building the ports and the infrastructure and everything else, they're farming Chinese in to these African nations to do the work. So you're not even getting participation on those. And if you follow the playbook that China actually did with Western companies coming into China, that local content requirements started to excel to get to the point where China became very competitive, very aggressively, very quickly. Right.
right,
And
exactly.
so some of these African nations are actually looking at that and understanding that, and they're like, "Oh, whoa, 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 whoa! We've got we've got all the wild cards, so we're going to do this differently now." And a couple of them are getting really, really smart about it, and they're starting to reverse that dependency back on their countries actually benefiting from their materials, their minerals, and what have you, and reversing, if you will, the leverage point, such that processing can start happening there. Their percentage benefit is potentially going to increase. So why not? You hold everything. It doesn't exist elsewhere. So you have
Gotcha. So and everything you're saying, I'm hearing you say, like, being that these countries are taking responsibility and understanding what resources they have, and they're leveraging it, in a way where they're gonna get more of the benefit, reap more of the profit from the resources.
the experience, the profit, the technology, right? The hands-on, and that's the learning, right? Right now they're being raped of the learning in addition to the minerals.
Right.
right?
They need to have that. So, I mean, with that being said, I mean, and I mean, this has been good. It's been a lot, man. I feel like this was a a book of cast.
Could be. We can go on. We can go on and on with this one for sure.
Yeah, we can go on and on with this one. So, and trying to close it out, we're really trying to connect, this idea of, global warming and how it impacts us. It's not just the environment, but it also affects us psychologically. I
Yeah.
mean, I realize that, hey, it really impacts young people. It also impacts people of low socioeconomic status. It impacts indigenous people, their lands. It impacts people who have pre-existing conditions,
Yes.
because they may not be able to move or get the medicines or the treatment they need when we have these disastrous weather conditions.
Mhm.
And but we have to take responsibility as individuals to be more conservative, to watch how much we lose the lights or run the water, clean up behind ourselves, try to have some sense of order.
Right.
Can't emphasize that enough. Try to share. I know people, we like having our own cars, but ride sharing, using public transportation. Hey, I would even say in America we could push to get more train and rail services to get us from city to city, to from community to community, so
High speed rails
we're
getting
not so
implemented.
reliant on cars.
Yeah.
we
It,
could we could do we could push for things like that,
it's in
but
process.
what'd you say?
High speed rail is in
High speed
process.
rail, yeah, we can
Yeah,
push for
there's
things like
some
that.
implemented in Texas. It's much slower than the implementation in California, but it is necessary.
Right. And I want to emphasize also that, that when it's hot, when it's when when it's the weather's really hot and there's a lot of unpredictability, we tend to be angrier, believe it or not,
Mhm.
to suffer road rage,
True.
all these things we don't think about. So, I mean, Mr. Bradford, man, I want to thank you for coming on and sharing all this information with us, man. Did you have anything else you want to share with us?
Oh, wow. I mean, there's a lot on this topic, but one of the things I thought of just as an example, I know one of a very good friend of mine, she makes her own clothes, right?
Hmm.
And when you consider the things that we consume, if we're more conscious about where they come from, right? Check the label, right? You see your clothes are coming from Bangladesh. You'll see that this is coming from China. You see this is coming from Colombia. And it's not that that's a bad thing, but consider the cost of that. And there's a global kind of mindset that I think is very helpful for us to have, where you're looking to make sure that locally you benefit. Their providers, service providers, and such that are there that have interdependencies around international realms as well. But we've got to have a global benefit, globally and locally, and it's not going to happen if we're not conscious of what's really happening over there. And over there,
Hey,
across the street, right, the next neighboring country, or another side of the world.
you bring up a good point. I really didn't, I thought about it, but it's a good place to talk about it because you're talking about clothes. A lot of us don't think about it. We, we constantly buy new clothes.
Mm.
Well, that's a form of consumption, and it also creates a a footprint, a carbon footprint.
It does.
Constantly buying things over because that stuff has to be made, and all the
Labor
energy
is
effort
needed.
that goes into having to make it. So
Sure.
when we don't take care of our clothes, or we constantly getting new clothes, and that's fine, but then we don't share the clothes that we get rid of with other people that maybe can use them. I mean, we're actually furthering the need for clothing, which
Mhm.
then uh affects us. And
It
you'll hear some people say, hey, we try to create our clothes or our items in a carbon neutral way. In other words, we're trying to be less harmful to the environment. But even, I love seafood, but I know most of the time when I get seafood, it's because of some boat that went out into the ocean or to the river or whatever.
And don't get the plane that flew it in there.
Oh, the plane that flew it in there. See, another carbon imprint. So the other thing with that is, trying to get food local.
Yes. Yes.
Trying to get food local, your vegetables as much as possible. Try to get locally grown food, right? Because it's less carbon imprint. Yes.
Exactly. My sister's managing her own garden, right? That's collected in Beechwood, right? They've got this little setup over there. She's got a section she paid for, and she's growing all her vegetables from there.
Yeah, so doing things like that is, you don't think about it. Those, if you like eggs, get those ones that right down the street. They say, locally farmed,
yes,
cage free.
There's a benefit to that. So part of it too, like the smarter we get about understanding how to communicate the benefit of local, as well as the cost of things that come from other places. And there's need and benefit for costs for things that come from other places. But when we understand what that cost is, we can be more conscious with the purchasing decision for or against them. Right.
Yeah. So like having that and learning how to farm in your backyard.
That too. Keep the rooster out of the hen house, but
farm. Yeah, so I mean, this is good, man. We have to do another part of this and go in deeper dive. But cool. For now, I really appreciate you coming on tonight, all the way from Houston. Because you could be doing something else. I hear your kids in the background.
Yeah, you're not supposed to hear them. They started peeping up a little bit. They're getting a little restless. I like to get dinner right now.
Hey, man. But anyway, you have a good evening, man. We'll talk soon. All right, but everybody, listen, y'all have a good evening and enjoy yourself. I hope you got something out of this episode. We want to encourage everybody to dig deep within yourself and really get in touch with your own humanity and appreciate and celebrate this earth, because it's finite just like us. So if we don't take care of it, who will? We have the mental capacity and the physical ability to take care of the earth. The animals and the insects understand their role in nurturing and taking care of the earth. Will we accept our role in taking care of the earth and reducing this anxiety and fear we have about the earth changing? We do have the power and the ability to do something different. So y'all, let's do something different. I'll talk to you later.